Same old game. Here's Johnny.
You're gonna need a big approach.
So serious.
Roll out.
I am Iron Man. This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 96 for December 22nd, 2014, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
If my sound is a little different than what we normally are, it's because this week I am recording on remote, as is Brendan, who is via Pennsylvania, and I am at home in my parents' house where I grew up, so a fun nostalgic moment getting to record this podcast from my old bedroom, which I haven't been in a really long time. So this is going to be quite a fun show, and a Merry Christmas to everybody out there as well.
You're supposed to say Happy Holidays.
Or Happy Holidays, whatever. Look, if you get offended by Merry Christmas, I mean this with all kinds of love, but get over it. It's okay. Everything's okay. It's going to be all right.
I completely agree. I just had to say that because it is so politically incorrect.
I know. It's such a small thing. Why do we debate that? I don't get it. But
I don't know.
Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion for another time. For this week's show, I'm going to be looking forward to this one quite a bit. We're going to be talking about The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, the third and probably completely unnecessary third of the Hobbit trilogy. And going off of that, we're going to take a break from the 2014 top threes. And this week, we're going to be discussing our top three moments from Middle-earth. So that includes either these three films from The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings films. So that should be a lot of fun as well. And then for our third segment, we're going to be doing a segment we call Rants and Raves, because I have a lot to rant about, and not just Sony. If you listen to our latest extra film, you know what I'm talking about. But before we get into any of that, I want to introduce this week's guest, a good friend of mine. Haven't had a chance to get him on the show before, but our good friend Jay Cluitt from Life vs. Film is joining us this week. Welcome to the show, Jay.
Thank you very much. The audio may be a bit bad as well because I'm currently riding a big pig.
Very nice.
Literally?
Sounds pretty good considering. And what's really going to be fun about this too is Jay loves these Hobbit films. If you know me, you know I haven't been a huge fan of them, so this discussion is going to be a lot of fun. So, but before we get into any of that, I'll toss it to you first, Jay. But how's your guys' week?
My week's been pretty terrible, to be honest.
Oh no!
It's the run up to Christmas, so it's always busy.
Oh sure.
But just work has been exceptionally busy as well. But I'm happy to not be at work at the moment.
Yeah.
Be at home talking about some amazing films. So yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Brendan?
Yeah, it's nice to finally be on vacation, I'll tell you that. I was telling you, JD, that I made the drive from Tennessee to Pennsylvania, about 12 hours of a drive to come back home. I decided to avoid flying just to save some money, and it was a nice money save, I'll tell you that. But
I bet.
I just love driving long distances by myself, and that's not sarcasm. It's my perfect me time. It really is.
It is good me time.
It is, and yeah, just pop in my own music, or just have no music and just kind of reflect on my thoughts when I'm supposed to be paying attention to the road.
That could sometimes be just as dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. But regardless, I made it here safely, and my car is not dinged up or anything. So
that's good.
It was a success.
Yeah. Well, glad to hear that. Glad everything is okay. My week was pretty busy as well. Like you guys, I'm glad to be away from work, and I got 2 weeks off, so that is pretty exciting. And I get to spend some time with my family over this last weekend, which has been pretty great. Like I said, pretty excited to record from my old room, which is kind of exciting. But before we get into it, one thing I want to plug is our latest extra film. Brendan, obviously you were on the show, but we also had the True Bromance guys. We had Simplistic Reviews and War Machine versus Warhorse, and we had a really great discussion on Sony, which I thought was fantastic. And of course, we reviewed Scrooge on that film. And just having everyone on that show, I thought it was just a great dynamic. It was a really fun episode, and definitely one I would check out. If you loved the Scrooge film, I apologize in advance with my thoughts on it. But
I was expecting something a lot more happier when I listened to that today. But no, you just slated it.
Well,
what's going on?
Here's the thing. I think if I would have watched it and had some sort of nostalgic aspect like Brendan did, maybe I would have liked it back in the 80s or the early 90s if I would have watched it as a little kid. But watching it now, I just didn't have the greatest of experiences, and perhaps maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But also, real fast, I want to say a huge thank you to Optimus Solo from Geekcast Radio, who has left a whole bunch of comments on our website, and he's tweeted us quite a bit lately, and I just want to thank him for him reaching out to us and listening to the show and commenting on just a whole bunch of stuff lately. So huge thank you to him for that. All right, guys, we got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it.
And here we go.
I saw the light fade from the sky. On the wind I heard a sigh. As the snowflakes cover my fallen brothers, I will say this last goodbye. Night is now falling, so ends this day. The road is now calling, and I must away. Over hill and under tree, through lands where never light is shone by silver.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 96. Brendan, you snuck onto this podcast right underneath my nose.
Yes. Sorry about that.
You cannot go to war.
This does not concern you.
Excuse me, but just in case you haven't noticed, there is an army of elves out there. Not to mention several hundred angry fishermen. We are, in fact, outnumbered.
Not for much longer.
What does that mean?
It means, Master Baggins, you should never underestimate dwarves. We have reclaimed Erebor. Now, we defend it.
All right, The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies is directed by, of course, Peter Jackson and stars Ian McKellen, Martin Freeman, Richard Armitage, and a whole bunch of other people that we'll get into. All right, I'll toss it to you first, Jay. Did the third and final Hobbit film live up to your expectations?
No.
Oh,
to be honest.
My God.
Well, hang on. This was about halfway through the year. This was my most anticipated film for the rest of the year.
Sure.
As you've already said, I am a big fan of these films. I love the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. I've loved the past two films. And the Battle of the Five Armies was going to be amazing. Because I've read the book, big fan of the book, and it's going to start off with the dragon Smaug attacking Lake Town, which is going to be immense. Yes. And it's going to be followed by the Battle of the Five Armies, which is going to be huge. It's going to be all of the great bits of Return of the King rolled into one. But it wasn't. I really liked this film, don't get me wrong, but it just didn't quite live up to everything I wanted it to be, shall we say.
Interesting. What about you, Brendan?
Okay, so this might be pretty fun. So I want to go back a little bit, and we were talking a little bit about this off air before we got started, but I mean,
sure.
Like the Lord of the Rings films, you kind of have to look at these three Hobbit films. It's really one film split up into three parts. So we're really just kind of reviewing the third part here. Unlike most people, when The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey came out, I absolutely loved it. I think I even put it on my top 10 of the year. I don't think it's as good as the Lord of the Rings films, but I thought it was a really nice, welcome return. And I still felt like Peter Jackson understood the Tolkien world and the language and everything, and it felt like a believable return back. And I like the lightheartedness of it. It kind of reminded me of what I still like about a movie like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It's not Raiders of the Lost Ark, which would be the Lord of the Rings, but it was still fun and playful. And then we get the Desolation of Smaug right after that, and I hated that film. That was like the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull for me. Like, seeing them in the barrels hopping around was like watching Shia LaBeouf swinging with the monkeys in that that fight scene in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It was just so beyond ridiculous, and I felt like Jackson started losing the language there. There were still some decent elements to that film, though. I thought Cumberbatch was great as Smaug. I thought Smaug was a really good character. I thought that dynamic was fine. So some minor redeeming qualities. Now the Battle of the Five Armies. I really like the song "The Last Goodbye" by Billy Boyd.
Yeah.
And that's the only good thing I can say about that.
The end credits was awesome.
Yes. Aside from that, JD, I have not seen Winter's Tale, and I don't plan on it. And because of that, I think this is my pick for the worst film of 2014. This was.
Oh, Jay.
I was halfway through this movie. I was just like, "Get me the heck out of here!" I was bored to tears. The language was just so. The writing was just terrible, I thought. There was no poetry in the writing like there was with The Lord of the Rings or even the first Hobbit film. It just felt so ordinary. The dialogue was just forced. The acting I thought was just terrible. I didn't believe anything. And on top of that, it just all came off as just so unintentionally goofy for me. Right in the start of the Battle of the Five Armies, you got all these armies slowly kind of emerging before this big battle. It reminded me of the emergences of the Anchorman battles. You know those like fights in the movie Anchorman?
Yeah.
All of a sudden this news team shows up.
Yeah.
And this news team shows up.
Yeah.
That's how it felt for me. It was that unintentionally goofy. And by the time the end credits started rolling, I was like, was I supposed to be moved by this garbage? I mean, this movie is one of the worst films of the year, bar none for me. I absolutely hated it.
Wow. I'm going to say I'm not near where Brendan is with this, but I'm not going to go as far as to say that I love it. The thing with me with this film is I actually think it's my favorite of the Hobbit movies. That being said, that's not saying a whole lot because I loathed the first two. I did not like really any of these movies. So while I say it's my favorite of the three, I didn't love this film at all either. So I'm sort of like you, Brennan. I don't completely hate it, but I have just as many frustrations as you do with this. Once again, it does feel overstuffed. A lot of it feels too contrived. Like you're saying, Brendan, the acting at times is very cheesy. It's really unintentionally funny. There's characters in this movie that don't make sense to be here at all, and yet Peter Jackson keeps going back to them for comedic relief. I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make sense, especially in big epic battle moments. We cut back to these, I guess they're comedic characters. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. I definitely felt the overstuffedness with the armies. There's 4 too many of them, really, especially as he is showing us these big overarching shots, right, of all these armies. They're massive and they're huge. And yet once they finally get to the battle, there's a few of them where we only see like maybe 10 of them or 20 of them and they all die instantly. Like, I never felt the epicness of those big shots that he was showing us. I felt like there were supposed to be a lot more people involved and we just don't feel that. And
yeah, and on top of that, you don't really care either because he's trying to establish some of these new characters in here and we never really get to know them. I mean, even so to this point, by the end of the movie, I didn't even know a lot of the dwarves' names.
Yeah.
So he did just a lot of stuff like that.
And most of these dwarves were introduced to us in the first one. I still don't know who they are.
Yeah, dwarf number 5.
Yeah. And I'll say I was frustrated with this movie 10 minutes in. 15 minutes tops into this movie. And I hate when sequels do this, but you know, let's devise a whole movie based off of something. Speaking of the desolation of Smaug, right? We have this whole movie that is dedicated to this interaction and this battle with this dragon and what's going to happen and, you know, his interaction with Lake Town. All that stuff is great, right? And then we tease that for the next sequel. And then when that sequel comes, we abandon that whole story arc 10 minutes in. I know that that's what he was trying to do, and this isn't the first franchise to do this, but that drives me absolutely insane. That
it's frustrating to build something like that and then to kind of rob us of that.
It was infuriating and so distracting. If that's how that storyline was going to end, as long as Desolation of Smaug was, just extend it 10 minutes more. I would have been perfectly fine.
I don't think they could have done that. I thought the same thing, but had they dispatched Smaug at the end of the second film, a lot of people would have kind of thought, well, that's the story done and dusted. We don't need to go back to the third film because the whole quest was go to the mountain, kill the dragon, get the gold. They do that, but then there's the big battle that follows, which it's a fault that you need to point at Tolkien in the book, because in the book, the battle is kind of almost an addendum. It's tagged on at the end out of nothing, and Peter Jackson's reading it thinking, this could be immense. I need to dedicate a film to this.
Yeah,
I think he just paced it a bit wrong.
I think that's showing the proof as to splitting this up into 3 films was a mistake. Because now when we see when we see all three of these films now together, you can really start to tell, okay, here's where they tried stretching it out to make 3 films out of it. Here's where they could have condensed it and things like that. You take all 3 films, even though I didn't like The Desolation of Smaug, I think if you look at it as an individual film, it's the most well-balanced of the 3. So if you kind of split the whole 3 films in half, and then maybe just shorten the beginning build-up and shorten the end battle, you've got your 2-part films right there. And then that's what they originally wanted to do. And then it would have been a very balanced experience, I think. Now you can really see where they went wrong, I think.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was getting at with that, because I understand, Jay, that with the story, that's the way it was written, and that's where they were going with it. Going into this, I knew that. I that was understandable. I agree with Brendan, though, that that's where you feel the stretchness of what Peter Jackson was doing. It was completely unnecessary, and like I said, just in general, I hate that device. It's just so unsatisfying to me, and it was just frustrating. I was taken out 20 minutes in because they had built this up, and then it's over in the blink of an eye, and it wasn't enjoyable for me. If anything, like I said, it just took me out of the film.
And on top of that, I was just going to say, on top of that, I didn't even like the way it was handled as far as how they executed that story arc, because I thought it was laughable the way it was done. I actually kind of
the execution was poor too. Yeah, what were you going to say, Jay?
So I agree that it's wrong to have been stretched into 3 parts. Now we've seen the films, they could have, I think, jettisoned the entire necromancer subplot, where Gandalf goes off to Dol Guldur. I think if they remove that, it could easily be a 2-film, maybe 3 hours apiece, and it would work fine. And then if they wanted to do a whole 3rd film just based on that, by all means. But I don't think it had much of a place in this one, and I felt those segments were the weakest.
I think the real reason there, it felt like it was really just desperately to tie in to the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yes.
And to explain where Gandalf goes, because it's frustrating in the book that Gandalf just disappears and pops up where he needs to. Which is just what he is the human embodiment of the Eagles, basically. He just shows up when he's needed.
Yeah. But that's why Gandalf is awesome, because he can just magically appear where he wants.
I love Gandalf as a character, but I don't need to explain where he's gone. I don't really care. I want to watch.
I think the mystery is actually what makes him more fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will say when he is captured and then there's that scene where they save him, I actually really liked that scene. That was probably my favorite part of this entire trilogy, even though I actually don't know this because I actually haven't read the books, but I've heard that part isn't actually in the book, but that battle sequence for me just worked. I had a lot of fun, and maybe it was because you had all these other characters from Lord of the Rings that I do know really well, and there's some nostalgia with that, and I know where that storyline was heading. I mean, I don't know. I thought that part was awesome, though.
That part's not in The Hobbit. It might be touched on in the Silmarillion, I don't know. But it's we basically just follow the Bilbo and the dwarves in the book. So wherever Gandalf's off doing something separately, not in the book. But I like in that sequence, Christopher Lee is 82 years old, but just kicks ass in that scene. It's amazing.
It was awesome. Yeah, that scene really worked for me.
And and I think I didn't hate that scene, so maybe I can't say I hated everything about this film other than the song. But it was neat seeing Saruman actually in the field of battle on the good side. But a lot of times, I think my excitement for that scene was knowing that he was going to have that line from the trailer, "Leave Sauron to me." Because then we know that that's going to allude to his turn to actually helping Sauron, start to return the power. But this is not really a spoiler, but because that scene's in the trailer, but they don't go. That was kind of my excitement seeing that tie into the Lord of the Rings. So I felt like they're really trying to build up to that, and they don't show anything with that either.
Sure.
So it doesn't. So I guess my excitement was kind of left dwindling because I felt like they were trying to build up to that moment that's going to really tie into the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and they never go that way.
And there's several different moments like that throughout the film where Peter Jackson is alluding to stuff that happens in the Lord of the Rings, and those parts can feel kind of distracting at times. For me, especially, the reason I was really distracted is because if you guys go back and listen to our Desolation of Smaug episode last year, we had Beast and Arcturus from the MGC TV podcast was on our show, and how Beast described what Peter Jackson was doing with these movies, I found hilarious, and that's all I could think about. And the way that he described them was that all he saw these films as was Peter Jackson to his Lord of the Rings trilogy. And that's how I saw those moments, was him going, yep, going back to Lord of the Rings there, going back to Lord of the Rings there. And that's how I saw it. And that phrase just stuck in my head. And so I was really almost laughing out loud in the theater. And it was distracting. And I can understand why he wants to do it. He loves this world and his Lord of the Rings films. And those films are fantastic. I don't think we needed to do that as much, but I can understand where he's going for with that, though.
Yeah, that is such a true statement, because it really just looks like he's fanboying on his own material.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, but it's such a shame, because I feel like granted, as much as I don't like these Hobbit films, he did a great job with the Lord of the Rings films.
Yeah.
There's no denying that.
Absolutely.
But you could tell that's a director that really understood those original novels that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. And he understood the language. He understood the world that was created. With these Hobbit films, he's here stretching it out into 3 films. So he's got to make up a lot of stuff on his own now. And that's where my biggest problem with these Hobbit films is that I feel like in a lot of ways, from the writing and the dialogue standpoint, the poetry's gone. It feels like the language is so ordinary, and then it just comes off as silly and goofy. It's distracting in that regard. So he's really got to take a lot of liberties and kind of do things on his own in order to make this stretched out like this.
Yeah.
And I don't think he understands enough of the world to be able to kind of create it on his own. I think with the Lord of the Rings, he had a lot of material to base that off of, and he understood that material that already existed, and he was able to adapt that. Here, he's got to pull a lot from the air, and that's where I really think it falters.
Yeah. And I'll say, I'd like to get your opinion on this too, Jay, but I'll say regarding some of that, like a lot of other franchises do this. Marvel does it as well. I just wish it was a little bit more subtle, because I didn't necessarily hate the throwbacks to some of the work that he's done, because The Lord of the Rings is awesome. And for people that love those films, some of these tosses is going to get you a little bit excited. I just think it should have been scaled back a little bit. But Jay, I'd like to get your thoughts on that too.
I agree it should be scaled back. There's a moment in Desolation of Smaug that I quite like, where Legolas is with Gloin, who's Gimli's dad, Gimli's father, and he kind of looks at a picture of drawing in his book and says, "Who's this ugly little whatever?"
Sure.
And that's my son, and it's Gimli, and that's a nice little nod that I quite like. But in this film, there's a few too many. Like, there's a bit near the end where I'm not going to spoil anything, but Aragorn is insinuated towards, but they don't say his name, and they make a point of not saying his name.
Yeah, they do.
And I was thinking,
exactly.
Everybody knows that's who you're talking about, because they say Strider, they say son of Arathorn. And if anyone sat in the audience not making that connection, then they've never seen Lord of the Rings.
Exactly.
So,
it's like fan service for the sake of fan service.
It is.
It's the most basic of fan connections. You'd be a very mild fan and know that connection. I think.
It's like I don't completely hate them, but just scale it back. It becomes too much. It's distracting. I agree. One thing though I want to talk about real fast. One part that did work for me is not the battles, and it's not obviously it wasn't Smaug at the beginning. I sort of, in some ways, I kind of liked Thorin's arc in this film. Mostly thematically, with this whole talk of money and gold and how it's blinding and how it can change you into another person. I didn't necessarily expect these kinds of films to, speaking of just the Hobbit films, to have something that I could take away thematically as, okay, I kind of enjoyed that. This is the one of the entire trilogy that did kind of work for me, because I did like seeing his arc going from someone that was very noble, very respected, into someone who, like everybody else, can be blinded by stupid ambitions and superficial material. And we do see that in this film. And it obviously plays into his character as a dwarf and what that means for his people. But there is a dream sequence that he has where he is literally swallowed by gold. And while it was a bit cheesy, it was a bit over the top, I think thematically it still worked for me. Something I still took away from this film that for me was much richer than any of the battles and much of the action of this movie. Or of this trilogy, really. I'd be curious to hear you guys' thoughts. That did work for me overall.
Well, I thought that sequence was fantastic. The dream sequence.
Yeah, me too.
I loved it.
Yeah,
I
liked
didn't think it was cheesy at all. And Brendan said he didn't like the acting in this film, but I think Richard Armitage as Thorin does a terrific job.
Yeah.
Martin Freeman's Bilbo is possibly the only one better than him in the film, I'd say, and because he's perfect casting. But I think Armitage does does a terrific job of getting that arc across, of getting that madness across.
Yeah,
that's consumed Thorin.
And this is where I'll vastly disagree with you guys, because I think Richard Armitage gives the worst performance in this movie. And I think those scenes of him, kind of demonstrating this kind of greed was so obvious for me that it just became laughable for me. And that dream sequence didn't work for me at all. It made me hate the character in many ways because it just felt so out of place. And it mostly had to do with just the way it was executed, I think. Just kind of watching him sitting in that throne, looking at all this gold, like he's kind of, sick with this dragon sickness that they call it in the film. It was just so obvious for me. And it took me out of the movie. It just made it so laughable. So I can't agree with that. That was actually one of the biggest reasons why I hate this film so much.
Yeah, see, I'll disagree with that because I think it plays into a lot of the problems that this race has experienced before. And maybe it was a little obvious. I think it was supposed to be a little obvious. And maybe I think the part that doesn't work for me is I felt like his turn to form, if you will, after the dream sequence was a little sudden. Like it was a little, okay, now I'm back to my normal self. I don't think we needed that transition as fast as it happened. I think overall, though, it was much more rich than anything else going on in this movie. And for me personally, really, in any of these films.
Well, the transition to sanity happened just as quickly as the transition to insanity. Do you think at the end of Destination to Smaug, Thorin was fine? And at the start of
I guess that's true.
He's crazy.
Yeah, and it just didn't work for me. It was the execution more than anything else. So in many ways, maybe I have to blame Peter
it wasn't
Jackson
perfect.
for that.
Yeah,
no, but it's something that I think it's a worthy theme to kind of explore. I mean, going back to the Lord of the Rings films, it was sort of explored a little bit there, the idea of greed and corruption like that.
Sure. Yeah.
But and that would have been a nice thematic parallel to the Lord of the Rings films, which I feel like is what this trilogy was kind of lacking in, were those thematic parallels. And in many ways, what George Lucas, I think, did wrong with the Star Wars prequel trilogy was that he thought he had to give so much fan service to tie into the original trilogy when there could have been a lot more done with theming and parallels that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this trilogy also suffers from. And I think mostly it was just the execution with watching Thorin kind of instantly descend into madness like that. Probably sounded good on paper. But the way I saw it in the film, it was way too obvious for me that it just became laughable. And by the time we get to some of the unhappy events toward the end of the film involving some of these characters, I wasn't moved by it anymore. I just couldn't.
Interesting. See, I won't go as far as to say that it's the worst or that it's terrible, but I do agree with you, Brendan, that overall it certainly isn't perfect, and that the Lord of the Rings trilogy does do it better, that's for sure. I just thought here it worked comparatively, especially to a lot of other things going on in these films. But all right, for the sake of time, we got to get moving on, so I'll toss it to you first, Jay. Any other final thoughts you want to talk about, and what grade would you give The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies?
I'd give it a B+ as my grade, because as much as we can pick faults in things, but the action for the most part is astounding. There's some terrific battles, particularly the kind of one-on-ones between Thorin and Azog, the big goblin thing, and Legolas. It's always fun to watch elves killing goblins, orcs,
yes,
anything. I could watch that for hours, and there is a good solid hour of that in this film. So I can't give it anything less than a B, purely because there's enough entertainment in there.
Okay, what about you, Brendan?
Even some of that entertainment I couldn't really find appealing. I guess at least with the orcs, and I said this complaint about the first Hobbit film, which is one of my big complaints there. I thought they gave the orcs too much personality in these films, that they didn't come off as very frightening for me. That's what I love about the Lord of the Rings films, is that the orcs didn't really have much to say in many ways. So their mystery, rather than giving them direct references to their origin, is actually what kind of frightened me most about them. Here, the main orc baddie, Azog, I always thought he was kind of a laughable baddie in this whole trilogy. I was never frightened by him or anything like that. But there are some, from a special effects standpoint, there are some really great shots here, though. I still think Martin Freeman as Bilbo is pitch perfect casting, and I think he's got some great moments here as well. In fact, I even prefer him as Bilbo than I do the moments that we saw Ian Holm as Bilbo in the Lord of the Rings films. And very different characters at that point. But I love Martin Freeman in these films regardless. So despite me saying that I only liked the Billy Boyd song at the end credits, there are some other moments sprinkled around here, but at the same time, this is still one of my least favorite films of the year. I don't give failing grades out very often at all. I'm not going to do that here because I think that there are still some minor redeeming qualities to this film. Like I mentioned, the special effects and some of the action, but only enough for me to give this movie a D+.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not going to go as far as a D+, but I certainly had a lot of issues with this film as well. Going back to the Thorin character real fast, as much as I appreciated a little bit of the money kind of theme that we were just talking about, one thing that I did not like was the crystallization of his character. I thought was just atrocious and so forced to me. It was absolutely ridiculous. I don't want to give too much away, but he's having a battle with this orc. And this orc, I'll just say, he ends up in a vulnerable position versus Thorin. And the whole time that this orc is in this vulnerable position, I'm thinking, please, Peter Jackson, don't do what you're about to do. Please don't do what you're about to do. And he teases it, and he teases it, and then it happens. And I'm like, what the... Gee,
I completely agree with you. I had that same moment.
So cliche and ridiculous. I was like, Peter Jackson, you are better than that. What are you doing?
Well, I mean, unlike you, though, I wasn't praying, please don't do it, because I was already not with the movie, so I didn't care at that point. But I was sitting there thinking, you're going to do it. You're going to do it. Aren't you?
Yeah,
You're gonna do it.
There it goes. It's like, no. It's just ridiculous. And so the way that plays out was so forced and just utterly ridiculous. I didn't care about that a whole lot. And going off of that, as much as I like Legolas, and I think he's fine, he doesn't have a ton to do in this movie, but again, the crystallization of his final fight, some of the effects there I don't think were superb, weren't too great. I kind of struggled with the end of that fight too, although watching him was definitely a lot more fun, kind of like what you were saying, Jay, watching the elves kind of fight against the orcs in general is just a lot of fun, and that part I did enjoy, but overall, I just didn't feel the epic fight of this. Going back to my original thoughts with this, they introduced these 5 armies. It's supposed to be this big battle, and we get some of that, especially when the other army of the dwarves show up, and there is some of that, but then it just scales down, and I never really felt it. And because I was never personally invested in a lot of these characters, the small scale fights certainly didn't work for me either. And don't even get me started on the whole love thing with the elf and the dwarf. Oh my God, I don't even get me started on that. One thing though I do want to talk about is I wish that Bilbo himself, while I agree with you, he has some good moments here. I love Martin Freeman. In the grand scheme of things, he's not really doing a ton in this film, and it felt like it was kind of all over the place, and I just wish that it was scaled down, and maybe the entire thing needed to be scaled down and just more focused, and focus on his character. It's supposed to be about him, and I feel like little of it is about him. But I will say the little parts that they do focus on, I think, work in general, and I think it's because Martin Freeman is so great as the character. So,
well, his lessened involvement in this film is, again, you can point that towards the book. I'm not the kind of person who always says it's in the book. It's in the book. It's not the fault of Peter Jackson, because it's always up to the filmmaker to correct any mistakes that are made.
I agree.
But in this case, Bilbo isn't actually conscious for most of the battle.
Oh, so, yeah, that's true. That's true. He didn't know what to
do. In the book, you see very little of the battle. He gets knocked out, and then that's it. He wakes up and is told everything that happened afterwards. So
that's very true.
They had to pay homage to that at some way.
Yeah. Well, overall, I had some issues with it, I'll say, but that is a very good point, Jay. But real quick, I just want to get your guys' thoughts on like the final ending. As much as we were talking about how Peter Jackson was kind of, I don't want to use the word again, but he's just in love with his Lord of the Rings material. The very final frame of this movie is literally them transitioning to Lord of the Rings. Did that work for you, or was that just kind of the same thing?
It works for me for when the event comes where I will eventually watch all 6 films in a row.
Sure.
Then they'll flow nicely into one another. So that works for me.
Okay, what about you, Brendan?
It would have worked if I liked this movie.
Okay.
No, seriously, would have. Sure. Because I like, maybe I'm biased, because I like when movies do that kind of tie-in, especially if it's like a really big saga like this. But if you're really in love with everything that's going on, and then it makes that transition knowing that you can now continue the story with the films that came previously, I think it's a nice feeling. And I love that kind of that kind of throwback to that. But in this case, I just didn't care anymore.
Sure.
And then it just came off as kind of obvious for me. So if I would have liked this movie, it would have worked.
I'll say it worked for me because that meant this trilogy was over and we were getting into the good stuff.
Now I can watch what matters. Yeah.
And I said this maybe some odd shows ago, but when I rewatched The Fellowship of the Ring after getting caught up with some of these Hobbit films, and because I never read the Hobbit book, that beginning opening sequence in The Fellowship of the Ring, it was so ambiguous to me. I didn't understand what they were talking about with all these references to dragons and this story with Bilbo and his birthday. And after rewatching that, it was kind of nice to know at least the backbone of what happened and what they were alluding to. So that part I did appreciate, I guess, as far as, hey, we're transitioning now to that moment. So,
sure.
And like I said, we get into the good stuff at that point. But anyway, my grade. I will give this a C plus maybe. I didn't hate it as much as the other two. How about that? That has that going for it.
I'll take that. I thought you were going to be a lot worse.
There you go.
I'll take it too.
All right. Well, if you want to read more of my thoughts on this, go check out our Letterboxd page at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm.
And if you agree or disagree with our takes on The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, you can let us know by leaving a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/InSessionFilm, or you can tweet us at InSessionFilm. You can also leave us a comment on our Google Plus page or email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com.
All right, the InSession Film Top 3 is next, and we're going to be discussing our top 3 moments from Middle-earth.
My precious.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Brendan, so we just got done reviewing The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, and I gotta say, just like a Hobbit, the first-time watchers, guys, they may be small, they have big feet, but they have a determination like no other.
I cannot wait to hear Tim's reaction to having big feet and being small. He's going to love that.
Yes, he will.
Regardless if it's true or not, I'll tell you, they do have a determination like no other when it comes to reviewing their films, and they do a great job at it. They're also a great supporter of our show. Definitely a podcast everyone out there listening, you got to check out. As I mentioned, Tim, you also got Walter and Humano, also small guys, I guess, but they know their movies, man.
Yes, they do. Their banter is absolutely amazing. It's very entertaining. Maybe not like the Hobbit movies, but definitely like Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, so at least he's got some good qualities to compare it to.
Exactly.
But as we mention all the time, what's really unique about them, every week they pick a movie that none of them have seen before and they discuss it. They get this fresh and really great down-to-earth conversation about it, which is always really good. Then they also talk about some other movie news and trailers that they've seen recently. It's very relevant. Definitely something you got to check out, everyone. Yeah, they also do some awesome movie recommendations at their end of the show that I would also pay attention to. They do a fantastic job. The show is so fluid, easy to listen to. You can tell they just have a lot of fun. And that being said, Brendan, tell us, where can you find these guys on the internet? There are a couple ways. You can go check them out at firsttimewatchers.blogspot.com, and you can also hit them up on Twitter at firsttimewatchers and also on Facebook. Just search for First Time Watchers. You'll find them right away, and get involved in any conversations that you have with them, because these guys, they're fun to talk to. Yes. I'll tell you. Yeah, absolutely. Don't be frightened if Tim comes off sarcastic. That's just the way he is. He's nice, though, I promise. Definitely go subscribe to them on iTunes. They'll leave them a review. Let them know that we sent you to them. I promise it's absolutely worth their time. Again, that's First Time Watchers.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 96, and now we're going to be going over our top 3 moments from the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit films or just Middle-earth, as we said earlier in the show. Before we get going into it, though, I'll toss it to you first, Jay. Did you guys have any criteria that you looked at to pick your list this week?
I just narrowed it down to Peter Jackson's trilogies. I haven't seen the Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings film, so I couldn't count that one.
Okay.
But, so it's just scenes from these 3. I wanted to include something from Lord of the Rings and something from The Hobbit, at least.
Okay, what about you, Brennan?
Yep, I'm in the exact same boat as that. It's as simple as picking my favorite scenes or moments that were strictly in Peter Jackson's films. Like you, Jay, I also tried seeing if I could pick something from The Hobbit as well as The Lord of the Rings, but just kind of saying up front, I can only pick stuff from Lord of the Rings because I'm doing I'm doing my top 3 from all these films. It just happens to my top 3 would be from the Lord of the Rings films. I mean, my biggest number 4 or my biggest honorable mention is from a Hobbit film. So I'll get to that towards the end.
Okay, well, I'm very much like you guys. Obviously, I just picked from the Peter Jackson films, The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, because that's all that I've seen as well. I will say I did not include the speech that Samwise gives at the end of Two Towers, because I've talked about that moment quite a bit on this show. Samwise, the character, has made several top 3 lists of mine. In fact, he made one just a few weeks ago when we were talking about characters from a trilogy, and I talked about that scene specifically, so I did not include that as part of my criteria. Otherwise, that would be an easy one that I would have on my list. So, that being said, Jay, what is your number 3?
My number 3 comes from Return of the King. It's one of the many endings. It's one of the earlier endings. And it's the moment where Aragorn says to the 4 hobbits, "You bow to no one." That's
okay.
It's these 4 guys. They were nothing at the start of the film. They were just a bunch of friends, knew nothing more than the borders of the Shire, and now they've done such great adventurous deeds and saved realms and whatever, and thrown rings in fires and other more difficult sounding things. And they still think they must bow to other people, but no, they have proven themselves worthy of being bowed to. I don't know. That's the one moment that kind of catches in my throat when I'm watching these films, and it's the point where the living room gets the most dusty and I'm in need of a tissue potentially.
It's a great moment. I would agree.
If you say you didn't cry during that scene, you're probably lying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very good stuff, Jay. Like it. All right, Brendan, what do you got at your number 3?
My number 3 is also from The Return of the King. It's I think it's probably my favorite battle scene from the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, and that's when Rohan rides into battle after King Theoden's speech. And mostly it's because after this epic speech that King Theoden gives his army, knowing that they're probably running into their final battle, and this is potentially riding into their death, you've also got this great moment between Eowyn and Mary on top of the same horse together, and she's like, "Whatever happens, stick by my side." I don't remember the exact words for it. And then when they charge those orcs, and those orcs break ground, and their reactions of fright, seeing this charge that just won't stop, is one of the most awesome things in this whole trilogy. And I look forward to seeing that, just to see the orcs' reactions to it. It's just awesome. But this is exactly why I love the Lord of the Rings films, and why I think Peter Jackson got this material right, was because he was able to establish characters we love, but at the same time make the battles dramatic for us. Because that speech that King Theoden gives makes this a moving experience too, and I love that balance. And it's perfect. And I love that.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, you're definitely invested at that moment. And yeah, I agree. That is a really, really solid moment. A good honorable mention for me. For my number 3, I'm going to, this is a little bit of a forced pick. Okay. So, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the Hobbit movies, but given that we're talking about our top 3 moments from either the Hobbit films or the Lord of the Rings, I wanted to try to find something from the Hobbit movies to get. So while if we were doing a true list, this might not make my top 3, but I'm going to include it in this anyway, because I think the scene itself is pretty cool, despite the context around it being a little ridiculous, I think. And I'm talking about the scene where Bilbo and Smaug have their interaction and their conversation. I think a lot of it is built on the performances here. I think Martin Freeman is fantastic. And of course, Smaug being voiced by Benedict Cumberbatch, those two actors themselves have great chemistry and have worked together before. And I think the way they're able to kind of bounce off each other in this scene, and of course, Bilbo's got his own purposes and his own motivations going on in the scene other than trying to survive. And I think visually it's interesting. I think what the characters are doing in the scene itself, I was pretty engaged with. And like I said, I think it mostly stands on the performances. The context surrounding the scene is a very different story that I don't want to get into because it's going to make me vomit. But besides that, I do think the scene itself is great. It's arguably one of the best standalone scenes in the Hobbit trilogy and one that I did enjoy overall.
I have to agree with you because that's my number 2.
Nice.
Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Perfect segue.
Exactly.
Yeah, I absolutely love this scene because, well, for one thing, I just generally love dragons.
Sure.
If they're in anything, I'll appreciate it. And Smaug is possibly the greatest dragon ever created. I don't know, but he's maybe the most famous, at least.
Yeah.
Until Toothless came along, at least.
Yeah, that might be my personal favorite, but still a good one.
Mine too.
But that scene where Bilbo first sees Smaug and sees just how enormous and impressive this creature is.
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously had an image in his mind that there's a big dragon down there. If you see it, don't wake it up, etc. But just the look on his face when he sees this thing that's the size of many, many houses. It's just huge.
Yeah.
And Martin Freeman just perfectly gets that look on his face of, oh, dear Lord, what have I done? What am I doing here? This is not my place, but here I am anyway. And there's a big dragon, and oh no, oh no, oh no.
This is one, again, okay, so I'm not going to be mad by seeing this pick, because this is one of the moments where I think Peter Jackson got the Hobbit films right.
Yeah.
Because even when you think about it, when you say to someone, oh, there's a dragon in this movie, they're like, oh, cool, and you say, yeah, the dragon also talks. Wait, what? It just sounds ridiculous when you think about
Sure.
that.
It sounds like Sherlock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But only in this world is a talking dragon actually work.
Yeah, sure.
But Peter Jackson actually gets that feel right for this, and I think the exchange that Smaug and Bilbo have is quite compelling.
I agree.
At least my favorite moment of that second film, which I was not a fan of, and probably one of the better moments from this entire Hobbit trilogy.
Absolutely.
I think. So I think that's a fine pick.
Yeah, it is a great scene. Despite what you think of the movies, I would definitely argue it's a great scene for sure. All right, Brennan, what do you got at your number 2, man?
My number 2 is from The Fellowship of the Ring and involves who might actually be my favorite character from this entire saga, and that's the death of Boromir.
Oh yeah, that's a great scene.
This scene is so heartbreaking, and mainly because his character arc is, I think, one of the most fascinating I've seen in this entire saga. You go from hating him to pitying him to actually caring about him in like a span of 45 minutes.
Sure.
But none of it feels forced. It actually feels kind of believable, and this is where the sense of like kind of greed and corruption that I had a problem with in this new Hobbit film. This is where I think it was utilized nicely, because when you kind of see Boromir kind of slowly kind of get succumbed by the power of the ring, where he offers to hold on to it for a bit, it's subtle enough that it worked for me. But then to see him try and redeem from those actions when he tried to take the ring from Frodo, and then him sacrificing himself for Pippin and Merry, and then that moment that he has with Aragorn when he calls him my king, it is so heartbreaking. And in my opinion, I think the character arc for that he goes through in this film, despite it being very brief, I think is just beautiful, and it's poetic, and it's wonderful, and it's even established better if you watch the extended versions of the original trilogy, and you see more scenes with him in the Return of the King with his brother and his father, and you see that he's the beloved son to his father.
Sure,
and it even helps establish the character even more.
Yeah,
it's probably at least one of my favorite characters from the entire saga. Too bad he didn't have more to do, but it's beautiful.
I love how they rewrote that. He's supposed to die at the start of the second book, but I love how they rewrote it just so that Sean Bean could not survive a film.
Exactly.
Even when he's supposed to.
Because he can't. Yeah.
He's not allowed to.
But I'm actually kind of glad they put it at the end of the Fellowship, because I think it's a nice way to show how things fell apart before they got to pick things back up again in this next movie. And I think from a pacing standpoint, from a movie point of view, I think it worked.
No, I completely agree. It's a great scene. I loved his death as well, and his arc, as you said, it's really fascinating. And on a more comedic side, it also gave us one of the best memes the internet has ever given us, with the "one does not simply" meme. One does not simply walk into Mordor. If you haven't seen those memes on the internet, do yourself a favor, get on the Google and have yourself a ball. It is fantastic stuff.
Yep.
For my number 2, I'm going to absolutely one of my favorite moments of any film of the 2000s for sure. And I'm going with the scene where Gollum is arguing with himself.
Sneaky little Hobbitses. Wicked, tricksy, false. No, master. Yes, precious, false. They will cheat you, hurt you, lie. Master's my friend. You don't have any friends. Nobody likes you. Not listening. Not listening. You're a liar. And a thief. No. Murderer. Go away. Go away!
And this is at night. They're in the middle of a forest. And you see Gollum, who, after Frodo and Sam have gone to sleep, he is trying to figure out what his next move is, right? Because he has this love for the ring. It's everything to him. It's absolutely what defines him. It's the thing that has drove him insane all these years. But there is a different side to Gollum, and he starts to find his Smeagol side, especially when Frodo and Sam are trying to bring that out of him. And in this moment, there is a love for Frodo that he is trying to stick to, right? He's trying to stay loyal to Frodo and to Sam, well, mostly to Frodo, and trying to get him to where he needs to go. But there's this incredible balance going on of those two loves, of his love for the ring, his love for Frodo, and what Andy Serkis was able to pull off as this character, going back and forth. And of course, Peter Jackson's doing a great job of cutting back and forth. To me, is just one of the most compelling moments ever in film, especially of the decade. And it was absolutely incredible. And for an actor to do that with himself, it absolutely shows why Andy Serkis is the guy that for motion capture nowadays, right? And it started back with these films in this moment, and it just shines so gorgeously that for me, it's a solid pick. It came close to making my number 1. It almost could be tied for my number 1. Fantastic scene for me.
Beautifully staged too, and this, yeah, you're absolutely right about Andy Serkis. This just proves that he's proving now that motion capture performance is really the kind of skill involved may even be more difficult than a standard performance. I won't be surprised if you see members of award shows or whatever start recognizing this, and then it's even more apparent in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, which I think is probably his best motion capture performance yet. Sure. At least from evoking an emotional response and a believable response from the motion capture. I mean, I think Gollum is still a character on his own terms, and it's fascinating already there. But what this guy does is just wow.
What he does as Gollum is fantastic. I agree with you. What he does as Caesar is just superb and it could be award worthy. But man, this scene specifically is so layered and is so incredible because he's having to evoke two different sides of a character all within the same scene, and he does it so amazingly well. You get the love for the ring, you get the love for Frodo, and that struggle. It's fascinating. He captures it so well.
And it's also kind of funny, too. The staging that Peter Jackson does for it is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's something he does really well in the first Hobbit film as well, with the riddles in the dark.
Yes.
So he's still got... It's retreading the same ground, essentially, but he still does it incredibly well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. All right, Jay, give it to us, man. What is your number 1?
Okay, my number 1, it's I think something that Peter Jackson does really well is action scenes, is very impressive action scenes, and I think the best of these comes in Return of the King, and I'm sorry, it's not going to give you a very good audio clip to play, but it's when Legolas kills the elephant.
That's going to be all noise now in the clip, yeah.
Yeah, but it'll end with Gimli saying, "Still only counts as one."
Yeah.
Because that's the clip on YouTube that I watched earlier today.
Nice.
33! 34! Still only counts as one.
You've got this battle between Legolas and Gimli as to who can kill more, and Legolas just kind of sees this giant elephant, and it's not just an elephant; it's
huge,
ginormous.
Yeah,
it's huge. It's not quite as big as Smaug, but it's close.
Yeah,
and he looks at it. He gets this slight little twitch of the eyebrow, like, okay, let's do this. And he jumps on the tusk and he's swinging around, and he just arrows going off everywhere, and he slides down the tusk and the trunk, and he lands in front of Gimli. It's like, still only counts as one, but I just love that. It's a really impressive standout sequence that I saw it and thought, I want to watch that again. Just stop the film, rewind it a little bit, play it again. I think I missed that. Just do it. And that's what I thought was missing from the Battle of the Five Armies, is something of that scale, just that one great standout moment. Yeah,
what Legolas should have done is got on Smaug and killed him. If that would have happened that way, it would have been way more epic.
Or at least one of the trolls. Well, actually, he got one of the trolls, didn't he?
Yeah, and that scene alone is kind of why I had a really hard time with this top three, because I really wanted to include a battle scene like that, mainly because of that contest that's going on between Legolas and Gimli is just incredible. It started with the Battle of Helm's Deep, where they started killing him, and I think Gimli says, "That's 5 for me," and then Legolas is like, "I'm on 17." He's like, "What? No." I love that, but those are some of my favorite moments of the battle. So it was really hard to pick a set pick on that, because it was almost like a favorite moment within an already existing moment.
Sure.
So, but so in many ways, the contest between them is just like a huge honorable mention for me, just sprinkled throughout the entire trilogy. It's amazing.
Well, all right, Brendan, what do you got at your number one, man?
My number one, I'm not going to go too much into because Jay had it at his number 3, but it is the crowning of Aragorn as the Return of the King, and when he says to the 4 hobbits, "You bow to no one."
My friends, you bow to no one.
I think mainly not only because it's a moving scene, but this scene I really think is what thematically defines the entire trilogy. In its heart, this really is a great coming of age tale, at least from the Hobbit perspective. And what Frodo and really all 4 of them had to go through, and how they grow as living people. I don't want to say people because they're not man, they're hobbits, but how they grow internally, and that it leads into this great moment where they all arrive back at the Shire and they're just having drinks at the table and they're just kind of looking at each other. You can tell what's going on in their head. Is that, wow, we've been through so much. We're not really the same people that we were anymore. We're not kids anymore, so to speak. We're adults now. That's kind of the way I felt about it. But that moment when Aragorn says, "You bow to no one," that defines thematically the entire trilogy for me. I think that's the most important scene in this entire saga, and it makes me tear up every time just thinking about it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a great scene for all the reasons we talked about earlier. I absolutely agree with you guys. Very good stuff. For my number one, there's a lot of really great small moments that we've talked about, obviously with Gollum arguing with himself, like that moment that you were just talking about, Brendan, just those small intimate moments that really make this franchise so great. But for my number one, I'm going to another reason why Peter Jackson was so perfect in the Lord of the Rings movies, at least for me. And it's not just the small moments, but the big epic nature of it. So for my number one, I'm going with the Battle at Helm's Deep. And going back to something that you were saying, Jay, about Gimli and Legolas and them kind of having this thing going back and forth, as you talked about, Brendan, it was started here at this battle, and I thought all of that was just a lot of fun. It was very entertaining. It was appropriately humorous, but at the same time, we get such an epic scale of it and what's going on, but you get some small, intimate battles all at the same time. That balance going back and forth, I thought was fantastic, and what was missing in the Hobbit films films, especially the Battle of the Five Armies. And I just love seeing what Peter Jackson was able to do, engulfing me in this world, engulfing me into this battle. And of course, the crystallization of it. And you have support coming from what Gandalf was doing. All of that to me was fantastic. It was just so dramatic, and it was frightening on some level. It was passionate in other places of the battle, and it was just one of the best battle sequences I've ever seen on film. And what makes Peter Jackson just so amazing with these films, and I think my frustration with the Hobbit films is like, why can't he capture this? This is the same guy in the same world. Why can't he capture the same thing? It just boggles my mind. But I think what he was able to do in just capturing Helm's Deep was just magnificent, and it added so much to our characters at the same time, and where it goes and how it builds into the third film is just amazing to me. So I love it for a bazillion reasons, really. But
and it was all leading up to that too, and it delivers. I'll tell you, it really does. And for that right reason, it's kind of like you were talking about. There are a lot of moments from an emotional standpoint that just help make it work. There are parts that are funny. There are parts that are heartbreaking. There are parts that are just awesomely epic. It's all encompassing, and it all feels so seamless. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I really want to go and watch Lord of the Rings now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm kind of thinking that too.
Yeah. And where are those Blu-rays at? Jay, any honorable mentions?
Many honorable mentions,
of course.
I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I'll start with the ones from the Lord of the Rings. I love, again, with Gimli and his relationship with Legolas, the moment that he says to Aragorn, "You'll have to toss me." Oh yeah. Just do makes me laugh.
Yeah,
because he's like, but don't tell the dwarf.
Yeah.
Sorry, don't tell the elf. Don't tell the elf.
Yeah.
Their chemistry was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and when Ian Holm as Bilbo gets that one shot, blink and you miss it, crazy eyes. He just looks insane for a moment when he tries to get the ring from Frodo. But in The Hobbit, I love from the Unexpected Journey, the Goblin Tunnel escape. I'm sure Brendan hates this sequence, but
I love that sequence.
Oh, excellent! When the dwarves are,
I told you I love an Unexpected Journey. I thought
I'm sorry, yes,
movie. Yeah,
it's my next one. It's my next one that you hate, but I love
Yes.
I love the dwarves escaping from the tunnels. I think that's great. It's watching them all work as one fluid unit is great fun. But in Desolation of Smaug, when they work as one fluid unit in the barrel sequence, which I also love, it's even better, maybe.
Nah, that's where I disagree.
Yeah.
Because it's the same as the Goblin Tunnel sequence, except with added elves killing goblins.
Added elves going tiptoe through the wind. Just like tiptoeing all
And finally, one from the Battle of the Five Armies. It's the moment after, I think, what JD was talking about, the bit where Peter Jackson, he was saying, don't do it, oh, he did it. It's actually the moment immediately before that, where, I won't spoil anything, but one character has a lump of rock thrown at him, and he just kind of tilts slowly backwards.
Yeah.
That had me crying with laughter in the cinema. I don't know why, but I just couldn't stop enjoying that moment. I don't know what it was, but I just loved it. I'm sorry. I'm not proud of it, but
I'll forgive you.
Very nice. All right, Brendan, what do you have as honorable mentions?
Oh, many for me as well. My number 4 here was probably going to be a tie at least, so I have to put like you put, JD, was the Smeagol versus Gollum argument with himself as well. Kind of tied with the Riddles in the Dark scene from the first Hobbit film, which I think is a spectacular scene all the way through until Bilbo chooses not to kill Gollum, and that's the scene where he took pity on him that's referenced in the Fellowship of the Ring.
Sure.
So I thought that was fantastic. So that was really the biggest Hobbit scene that I was talking about that I thought would at least be close to my top 3 was the Riddles in the Dark scene. Going back to Lord of the Rings, I think the forming of the Fellowship's another great scene. The Battle of Helm's Deep that you talked about, JD, is also a great scene. There are just too many to kind of sit here and pick through, so I'm just going to kind of stick with those for now, because they're either all been talked about or they're just too many to sit here and name.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brennan. There are so many you could talk about. Just a few that I'll mention is the other Hobbit one that I would have. In fact, it was very, very close to making this list, is the one that you alluded to, Jay. I actually had it written down before you said anything. But the scene between Bilbo and Gollum, I thought was fantastic in the first Hobbit movie. That was definitely one scene that worked for me, even though I didn't like that film overall. Another one that I would have, and this is maybe one that's up for debate with some people, people, but I really like this idea that Frodo at the end of Return of the King knows that he can't go back to the Shire. Like, he's just been through too much, and there is a different ending in mind for him that he has. And I think thematically what's going on there and internally with that character, there's a struggle, but he is just done for. And what he accomplished, I think, really justifies that in a lot of different ways. I won't go into here, but I think it's a fantastic moment that I really love quite a bit as well. There's also the Mount Doom battle at the end of Return of the King, which is fantastic as well. And another one that I really enjoyed quite a bit, and this is one a little bit I feel like off the rails given a lot of the other stuff we've been talking about, is I love a lot of the scenes with Arwen in The Lord of the Rings, and especially her interactions with her father, I found very compelling. And this idea of this elf in love with a man and how that is going to change her dynamic as an elf, I thought was really interesting. And for a film that isn't completely focused on romance, and I'm a sucker for a good romance if done right, I think in this world and in these movies, I think it's done in a really fascinating way that I was perfectly engaged with, and I love those scenes. I think they're really, really well handled, so that would be a good honorable mention for me as well.
So you're okay with an elf loving a man, but not an elf loving a dwarf?
Well, here
are you a sizist? What's wrong?
Or it's because no, I think it because the execution in the Hobbit movies are so atrocious that I can't buy into it. But if it was done in the same vein, perhaps I would have bought into the Hobbit movies. But nothing was done in the same vein in those movies, so nothing works for me.
Nah, he just hates the little people.
Yeah. No, it has nothing to do with little people. Anyway, that's all I had on my honorable mentions list this week.
So anyone out there, let us know how your picks stack up against ours for our top 3 moments in Middle-earth. You can email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com or leave us a comment on Facebook or Twitter or on our website at InSessionFilm.com. Also onto this topic, we also threw this question out there as far as following Twitter responses that we've gotten back. And so we got some great feedback from you guys. We just want to start reading through some of them right now. So regarding top 3 moments in Middle-earth, Shadow Fedora came back to us saying the Helm's Deep charge at number 1, which is a great one. That's
Amazing.
A great one. I'll tell you right now. Gollum's backstory in the opening in The Return of the King, another really good one. Also, Aragorn and his company rushing the Black Gate. Some really good stuff there. Following films came back to us saying Boromir's death. That's a fantastic pick.
Yes, that's a good one.
Gollum eating fish is hilarious.
Yeah.
I also love the scene with the rabbit, him and Sam. It's also really funny.
The stew.
Gollum and food. That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
And Aragorn raising the army of the dead. I think that's a great pick. Probably one of the more frightening scenes of the trilogy as well.
Sure.
You also got Smog Dude came back to us and alluded to the Helm's Deep battle, a very popular pick, obviously, and also a great choice for the right reasons. The battle at Mount Doom, I think that's probably one that might get a little lost in the shuffle because I think people talk more about the other battles, but a great pick.
It's still good.
And you also got The Last Goodbye, The Grey Heavens, probably one that might be a bit debatable, but regardless, a solid pick. It adds a lot to the story. Continuing on, you also got Spen Luke is the last one that we got here. We're going to read off. Frodo puts on the ring when he's falling. I guess that's the first time we actually see him put on the ring. A great moment, really good dramatic sense there.
Yeah.
Any moment with the Eye of Sauron, I think.
I love that. Yeah.
A cheap shot, but I think that's a really good pick regardless. Also, you got the moment that Sam and the hobbits jump on the bed. For the record, that third one was a little mean-spirited, but hey, it makes me laugh.
Gotta love some sarcasm.
That's a great way to say that, Spen, Luke. I think that's a good point, but
great.
Regardless, it's a good, nice, heartwarming closure to this trilogy. Yeah. I think that's a really good one to talk about. So yeah, a lot of great responses. It just goes to show how many great moments there are in this great trilogy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got a ton of great responses. So thanks everybody that did get a hold of us for the top 3 this week. All right, before we move on, let's talk about this week's poll.
It's real bad. Okay? I don't like those numbers at all.
Just one poll? Those things aren't scientific.
Yes, they are. All this is science. This is math.
All right, for our poll question this week, we simply asked, if you could hang out in Middle-earth for a day, which character would you spend the day with? And I feel like this is a pretty difficult one, too. There's obviously a lot of different characters that you could spend the day with. But the options that we threw out there was Frodo, Bilbo, Samwise, Gandalf, Arwen, Legolas, Aragorn, Galadriel, or a write-in option, you could write in whatever you wanted. Before I give the results of the poll away, Jay, who would you spend the day with in Middle-earth?
From those options, I would probably pick Gandalf, just because I think you'd have the most fun with him. If you're hanging out with Legolas, would probably do the most action, but you just feel like emasculated because you could never do anything this guy's doing.
Exactly.
But with Gandalf, you probably just kind of sit down in a cozy corner in a big armchair, smoking a pipe, as long as it's for a while. And he'd have such great stories.
He would have great stories, exactly. Yeah,
and fireworks.
Yeah, exactly. What about you, Brendan?
So yeah, if I had to pick one of them from that list, I'd also pick Gandalf for those exact same reasons. But onto the subject of the fireworks, I think I'd rather be one of the mischievous ones stealing the fireworks. So my write-in option was Merry and Pippin.
Oh, nice.
They'd be the ones I think would just be a riot to hang out with. I just have a blast being mischievous and breaking the rules. It'd be like going back to my childhood again. It's like,
sure.
I would just love that. It'd be fun.
No, I completely agree with you guys. For me, I would probably spend the day with Samwise because he's one of my favorite characters. I think he's one of the best movie sidekicks of all time. I've talked about him a lot on the show, and I think he would have some interesting stories to tell too. Plus, I just want to hang out in the Shire. The Shire just looks so peaceful and fun and relaxing, and that's where I'd like to be. So, as for the results on the poll, though, winning this pretty handily with 32% of the vote was Gandalf himself. Not surprisingly at all, and this would be my second option for very obvious reasons, but Arwen was in second place with 21% of the vote, and my boy Samwise was in third place at 12% of the vote. And we also had several write-in options for Gimli. We also had one for Tauriel and a few other hobbits as well.
I really hope that it was only men that voted for Arwen.
my guess is yes. But the funny thing is, we don't have time to talk about all the responses we got on social media, but we had several on social media and on Google Plus for girls saying the same thing about Legolas and some of the other male characters.
You didn't mention my write-in answer,
which is
Radagast the Brown and Sylvester the Hedgehog.
Oh, of course, that would be you.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, I was reading that and I'm like, I don't even know if I know who those characters are.
Oh, Radagast is the one with the bird mess in his hair, the wizard who's kind of adult and crazy. And Sylvester the Hedgehog is the hedgehog he brings back to life in the first one, who's adorable.
Just high the whole time.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there you go. Anyway,
entertaining.
Anyway, thanks to everyone that voted on the poll this week, or like Jay wrote in an option. We do really appreciate it. We got a ton of responses.
Absolutely. And coming up next, we've got our segment called Ranting and Raving, a segment that we've done before on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Yep.
Apparently, JD has a lot to rant about.
I do.
So this should be a fun discussion. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey guys, I just want to pause for a quick second to say a huge thank you to those that are supporting the show. If you want to help support us, there's a couple ways that you can help support us. One, you can just go to InSessionFilm.com and you can click on our bonus content tab on our website to listen to our bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. They actually are free to listen to on the site, but we do encourage and appreciate that small donation. It goes a long way into help supporting us. And for our bonus content going into 2015, we're going to have a fun new segment with a guest we've had on our show plenty of times. You love him. He's going to be fantastic, and I can't wait to get going into that in 2015. You're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. And also, you can help us by going to InSessionFilm.com/store and check out the InSession Film store. And it's so appropriate this time of year, right? With t-shirts and mugs and all kinds of fun stuff that would be great as Christmas gifts, either for yourself or for someone you love. And again, that helps support the show directly. And as mentioned up at the top of the show, we're supported by audibletrial.com. If you go to audibletrial.com/InSessionFilm, you'll get a free audiobook and a free 30-day trial just for signing up. It's perfect for people on the go, very busy like me. That's the way I like to read my books. And again, that really helps support the show. So no matter what you do, even a subscription to iTunes really helps us out, and we really, really do appreciate everyone's support.
Hi, this is Greg.
This is Chuck.
And this is Dan. And we are Talking in Circles.
Because the world needs another podcast, we are here as Geekcast Radio's newest edition. And as the title says, each week we get lost in conversation about a wide range of topics, including movies, comics, games, art, TV, and even occasionally sports.
We play games and discuss pivotal topics like who would win in a fight, the Kool-Aid Man or Tony the Tiger, and examine the hot-button issues of the world of geekdom.
We keep things fresh by taking timeless topics in new directions. We are simply three friends having a fun time talking about life's most fascinating foibles.
Stay connected with us every Tuesday on iTunes or at geekcastradio.com.
You're listening to the InSession Film Podcast. This is episode 96, and now we're going to be continuing a fun segment that I stole from Jay called Ranting and Raving.
So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
All right, guys, this segment is pretty simple. We've done it before on the show. We're just going to pick some topics related to film, and we're either going to rant about it or we're going to rave about it, depending on what it is. Jay, what do you have? Are you happy? Are you mad?
I'm generally an angry person, so I'm ranting this week.
Awesome.
I have a lot to complain about in life.
Okay, yeah.
I'm ranting about something I didn't know about before I started podcasting and blogging with people outside of this country. I'm in the UK, I'm in England, and I found out recently that an American tradition for families is that they go to the cinema on Christmas Day.
Yeah.
Cinemas are not open in the UK on Christmas Day.
What?
I know.
That is terrible.
Yeah. And I talk to people quite a lot, and they say that that's what they do every year. They go and see some great films that are released on Christmas, and they're just not open here. And I hate that. Granted, if they were, my family would not be up for it anyway, because I'm the only film literate person in my family, I think. And they'd rather just stay in and play Scrabble, whatever. But I would like to go to the cinema with some friends on Christmas and start a tradition, but I can't.
Man, we gotta make a change. Is there a petition we can sign, or?
I will start one.
Okay, you let me know. I'll be the first to sign it. That is just ridiculous.
Or you can just move here.
Yeah,
exactly.
Many people tell me that's how to solve most of my problems, is just leave England. They're right.
Well, we have plenty of problems of our own. Don't you worry. So, all right, Brendan, what do you got, man? You ranting or you raving?
Well, normally I like to rant on this show, or even rant about certain things that's going on, but I'm going to rave about a few things, specifically two things, but over the past few days, maybe past week or so, they've released some new trailers for upcoming films, and two of them I think are quite awesome. Specifically, I know that some of the reviews for this film haven't been, I wouldn't say bad, but they haven't been stellar, but this new trailer, I think, for American Sniper is just awesome.
Yeah.
I saw it in the theater about a week ago, and I was just like, oh god, I hope Clint Eastwood's back. I hope he's got his knack back again, because it's been 6 years since we saw a really good film out of him. But that's a wonderfully staged trailer. I love the tension of it. And on top of that, there was another trailer that came out, and I saw it in front of The Hobbit. I didn't catch it online like I normally catch a trailer first, but the new trailer for Mad Max Fury Road, wow.
Yes.
Yeah. Incredible, right?
Just wow. And I mean, like, first off, you got Tom Hardy, who I think is basically one of the best actors working today, and I cannot wait to see him as, the title role again for this Mad Max film. But this just really, I think, goes to show how excited I am for 2015 summer movie season, because
it's gonna be fun.
Like I said many times, I think they're already doing a good job marketing it, unlike what they did this year, which had great films but so badly marketed. So that's why I'm raving. I think 2 great trailers in only a couple days, and this just goes to show how great next year I think is going to potentially could be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in a year with Avengers, and you got Ant-Man, and you got a Pixar film, and who knows what other Disney stuff, and Star Wars, Jurassic World. Like, this film, I feel it could just fly under the radar for a lot of people. But I agree, that trailer and Tom Hardy just looks so incredible. I can't wait, yeah.
Yeah, I've only seen the first trailer for American Sniper, that kind of one clip of Bradley Cooper, do I take the shot kind of thing. And that's enough for me. That
I agree.
Hooked.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So, very good stuff. All right, for my first one, I'm going to be ranting, and this is kind of going off my rant, Brendan, if you will, the one that I had on our extra film this last week, where I kind of went off a little bit. If you listen to that, you know that I'm not a huge fan of the response that Hollywood has had to this whole Sony thing, and it's been kind of ridiculous on so many levels. And I don't want to go too much into that necessarily, but I do want to dive into it a little bit, because what I am ranting at is really the U.S. media and how they have handled a lot of this. I think a lot of the root of the problem lies within the U.S. media, because if something happened, let's say Sony released it and something happened, a lot of people could really point it back to the terrorists, right? It's their fault because they were the ones that actually made this happen. And while I would applaud people that think that way, I don't buy for a second that the public would respond the same way. And I don't think that the U.S. media would respond the same way. If Sony had released the interview and something happened, everyone would start pointing fingers at Sony. And for me, I think the battle was lost in terms of Sony having to pull the film when the U.S. media started pawning off stolen information from the terrorists to begin with. And when that started happening, it was this downhill snowball effect of things getting worse and worse, and it started to tie Sony's hands in a lot of different ways that I complain a lot about on our latest extra film segment. So in my book, I think the concession was lost way before they pulled the film. And I think what Sony did was the right thing. Despite what your politics are, despite what the president says, I think what Sony did, safety had to be their priority. And the thing is, even if they didn't pull the film, it wasn't going to be shown anyway. The theater owners had abandoned the film at that point. So why even go out and risk anything to begin with if it's only going to be playing in little theaters here and there? So I completely bought what Sony did. I think they did the right job. Maybe they could release it on VOD or something like that, or release it free to the internet. And I think that's where their mistakes may lie if they don't do that. If they don't release it at all, that's where Sony is making the mistake. Besides getting hacked in the first place, that shouldn't have happened either. But I think where this all snowballed from was the U.S. media and taking all this information and going crazy with it. That's exactly what these guys wanted. And they knew that the U.S. media would do that. And I think a lot of the problems stem from that in this instance. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Sony's been perfect, but we've got to do a better job of giving them support in a moment that is bigger than all of them. We're talking about creative freedom, creative expression, which is bigger than Sony, and we need to stand behind them, in my opinion. And there hasn't been enough of that, I don't think. So it's been kind of heartbreaking to see this happen and to see where this is going to go. I'd be curious to see how this is going to affect the film industry and other big studios, but I've been kind of heartbroken over this situation. It's been something I've been pretty passionate about if you follow me on Facebook and on Twitter, but I'm very disappointed with the U.S. media and their reaction to this and them kind of giving into the hands of the terrorists. That, to me, is where a lot of this battle was lost. So, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think going off of that, but it's been pretty sad for me.
I was listening to the extra film segment earlier today, and I was just sat at my desk nodding along, agreeing with everything you were saying. It's been so refreshing to hear somebody in defense of what Sony did, because there's so many articles just saying, like, why Sony are cowards over how they've acted. And I've just always thought, no, there was a terrorist threat, and they had to do it the way they did it, because there's a potential for a loss of life. How could anyone think they'd act any differently?
Yeah.
So I just thank you for putting the starting making sense.
Yeah, and JD, I was on that discussion obviously, so you kind of know my thoughts, but I'm in agreement that I do think Sony made the right decision, and I think they were unfairly targeted, by media, by even other actors too. And but since that discussion, we've had some new updates onto this whole news event. I don't know if you've seen a lot of these things, but now the U.S. government is involved. And even President Obama has stated that he thinks that Sony made the wrong call in pulling the film, that they should have contacted the U.S. government when it comes to potential acts of war, which, that statement I think does make some sense. But at the same time, going out to say that you guys made the wrong call in pulling the film, I think is also going a bit too far. But now we're getting this is getting kind of frightening when you think about it, because now we're getting some exchanges between the U.S. government and the North Korean government, and it's getting kind of violent. I don't know if you've seen some of those direct responses that have been going on between both sides of this, but it's getting kind of freaky. Apparently, President Obama has come out saying that we will respond accordingly and in our time of choosing, which that's after that the U.S. government has apparently claimed that they've linked the Sony hack directly to North Korea, which in my opinion I didn't see any valid proof of what they claim, so I don't know if that's true or not. North Korea has responded to that, saying if we retaliate, they basically said they're gonna blow up the White House, is what they said. That's an exact line exact quote from something that they've said. And I don't know if you guys have seen that, but it's coming to a point that it's getting way out of hand, and I have no idea what's gonna come of this.
No, I agree, and it's kind of crazy, Brendan, because we were kind of joking about how quote unquote funny it would be. And I hate to use that word now, but how interesting it would be if a James Franco and Seth Rogen movie started another world war, or at least another war with the U.S. And maybe it won't go down that route, but it's getting more and more real the further this goes on, and I hate to see that happen, because in the end, it's a comedy movie. Like, yeah, I agree with you. It's getting out of hand. It's getting a bit ridiculous. But what are you gonna do?
And I mentioned this to you, JD, but I'll say this before I finish saying my piece. But I don't watch Saturday Night Live that much anymore. In fact, I think I've hated the show for the past 10 years or so. But Mike Myers reprised his role as Dr. Evil.
I heard about this. I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, and it's the first thing I think Saturday Night Live has done right in over a decade. It's not only is it funny, but he basically just rips apart both parties, both North Korea and Sony, and basically, and he makes a lot of pretty interesting points. Did I agree with everything? Did I think he went into enough detail to fully support what he was saying? Maybe not, but that's the nature of a comedy sketch. But he makes a lot of pretty interesting points, and it's one thing he says about the hackers, saying, "You guys call yourselves the Guardians of Peace or the GOP. Get real, guys. There already is a GOP in existence, and they're already an evil organization."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he says about Sony, he's like, Sony, embrace this. This is probably the best thing that's happened to you guys since you haven't had a hit since the Walkman.
And who knows? It could play well into Sony's hands in the end. Who knows? But I agree, it's getting a little crazy. But
it really is. Yeah. But definitely check out that sketch, because I think it actually adds some lightheartedness and some pretty good points to the matter.
Yeah, in the end too, and this will be the last point, and then we'll move on to your next thing, Jay, is the U.S. media, I think, has to own up to this in some ways. They need to do an Ivan Locke, if you will, and own up to their responsibility in this too. It's something that nobody is talking about, but I think it's something that needs to be on the table. If there is stolen information out there, that doesn't mean you have to pawn it off and go crazy with it. I do think that it started there and it needed to end there, and we didn't have to release all this information that was private. It was private information that was stolen, and nobody's talking about that, and I don't know why. But anyway, that should do it for Rants and Raves. That was a fun segment. Thanks, fellas.
Rave and many.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right, so if you have any other suggestions for any rants or raves out there, or just anything you want to talk about, you can let us know if you agree or disagree with our takes too. Leave us a comment on Facebook or Twitter, or email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Either way, we'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
All right, before we get out of here, Jay, thanks so much for being on the show this week, man. It was a pleasure having you on the show. Finally glad to get you on.
Yes, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So since I forgot at the top of the show, since I'm an idiot, can you tell us where people can find you and your awesome stuff on the internet?
I didn't want to say anything earlier, but I'm too polite to English. But yes, you can find me. My main site is lifeversusfilm.com. That's Life vs Film. My main mission is going through the book of 1001 movies you must see before you die. I'm not very far through it at the moment. There's a long way to go, but that's what I'm working on. I also write for FrenchToastSunday.com. You've had a few French Toast Sunday people.
Yeah, I love their show. Yeah.
And I also write for Blueprint Review, which is blueprintreview.co.uk. And I also host the Lambcast, which is the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs. JD has been on quite a few times in the past, and I'm going to hopefully get Brendan on in the future as well.
Yeah,
I look forward to that.
Excellent. We're a very different podcast. I can talk good things about it because I didn't actually create it. I inherited it earlier this year. The Lamb is a big community of film bloggers, podcasts, etc.
Yeah.
And the podcast, we have myself and Robert, my co-host. We're joined by up to 3 people every week from the Lamb community. So it's a show that always has more guests on it than hosts, which is different, and it's ever changing. And we talk about pretty much anything and everything: new releases, old films, draft shows.
Yeah.
If you can think of it, we'll talk about it. And if you can think of it, we don't talk about it, please let me know, and we'll do a show on it.
Yeah, it's a fun show, one I would recommend, and what you guys have been doing, Jay, with that has been amazing. And for those that do blog about movies and different things like that, I mean, I highly would recommend checking out The Lamb. In fact, a lot of the guests that we've had on our show over the couple of years we've been doing this have come, and I've met them through the Lamb Network. So, it's been great getting to know you guys through all that, and it's a great show.
The Simplistic Reviews guys come on the show. I think you've had Vern on from Video Vortex. Pretty much everyone you had on.
Yeah, a lot of them have come through there.
And if they're not, they should join.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. But that should do it for this week's show. Be sure to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/InSessionFilm. You can also follow us on Twitter at InSession Film, and on Google Plus and YouTube, just search InSession Film. And also sign up for a monthly newsletter. You can do that on Facebook by clicking the newsletter tab, or on our site at InSessionFilm.com/newsletter.
And for more thoughts on the films that we watch, you can check us out on Letterboxd, which you can do at letterboxd.com/InSessionFilm. We also try to respond to every piece of email that we get, so you can also email us at InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Also, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and on Stitcher. And while you're on iTunes, leave us a review and comment there. We'd appreciate some feedback on that medium as well, folks. Also, you can check us out at our Listen Now page, which you can find on our website at InSessionFilm.com/listen-now.
And the InSession Film Podcast is supported by our super awesome listeners like you. Once again, if you want to help us, just go to our website at InSessionFilm.com. You can click on our fun bonus content tab in our main menu to hear our bonus content for just a small donation of 99 cents. You can check out the InSession Film store, a good thing to do this time of year, or you can just go to InSessionFilm.com/donate. You'll see a bunch of information there on how you can help us out. And you can hear everything we do. I would highly recommend this under one roof on our mobile app for just $1.99. And you can find that app on the Amazon Market for Android devices, the Windows 8 phone store for Windows devices, and the Podcast Box app for iOS devices. And all those details are on the site at InSessionFilm.com/apps. As for next week on the show, Brendan, we're going to be discussing Into the Woods, I think, and possibly even The Imitation Game is what I have scheduled. So a lot coming out Christmas Day. Obviously, Jay's not excited for any of those films, but a lot of good stuff coming out. We also have Foxcatcher coming out in our area here next week as well, so that's going to be on our extra film here in a few weeks. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. So yeah,
finally getting caught up.
Yeah, finally getting caught up on everything. Absolutely. So before we get out of here, Jay, any final thoughts on anything?
I think we have to start this show again. I've forgotten my pocket handkerchief.
Oh, man.
Oh, how dare you?
Well, on that note. All right, Brendan, any final thoughts, man?
I'm good, man. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of extra film, this week for our extra film, it's going to be released after Christmas, probably Friday or Saturday morning. We're going to be talking about Chris Rock's top 5 and also The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, the latest from Studio Ghibli, which should be a really, really fun show. So be sure to be on the lookout for that. As far as any other final thoughts from me, Peter Jackson, please stop making these Middle-earth films. I love Lord of the Rings, and I can cherish those forever. But please stop.
It makes me think, what would have happened, or what would these movies have been if Guillermo del Toro stayed on board to direct them?
I know. If this saga is going to continue, and we're going to be in Middle-earth, let someone else handle it. You can stay on as a producer, but let someone else take the reins. Let Guillermo del Toro give us his version of Middle-earth. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
So
I think George Lucas already learned that by giving Disney Star Wars. So
yeah.
It just took him really too long to realize his mistakes.
And on that note, I'm going to stop ranting. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be joyous, and I'm going to have a good time through this week. So Merry Christmas, everybody! Thanks, Jay, for joining us once again, man. It was great having you.
My pleasure.
Show. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
It is very CG heavy. It is Peter Jackson masturbating to his other Lord of the Ring trilogies and all over himself, but also unfortunately on the audience because you feel horrible and sticky at times. Wow. In a bad way. I haven't used the F word. It's still PG-13.
Yeah, but it's a graphic images.
That is graphic, but it's so on point, though, at the same time. God damn.
Come on. I'm sticking to the censorship rules.
No, that was good. That was a great description.
So,
for the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.